Welcome back. You're watching The Full View. Asian countries are begging to receive Afghan refugees who have fled the country through different borders. So let's speak now to our correspondent in India, Neha Poona. So Neha, let's talk about the situation in Afghanistan and its impact on neighbouring countries. How is India specifically affected, and why would it be keen to receive refugees who are fleeing Afghanistan?
Well, as you can imagine, this is a situation that impacts, among many other countries, particularly the Indian subcontinent. While for many days now, the world's attention has been focused on the scenes playing out outside the Kabul International Airport, particularly in the last 24 hours, given the bomb blast that took place there. There's similar scenes that have been unfolding in another little-known area called Spin Buldak. This is along Afghanistan's southeastern border with Pakistan. The two countries share a 1,600-mile-long border, and this particular town is where tens of thousands of Afghans desperate to flee the country, to make it across the border into Pakistan, have been gathering for days now. Many of them walking on foot with their lives' belongings in one bag, hoping that Pakistani authorities will let them across. Many of them have evaded Taliban checkposts, and we know how difficult it has been for Afghans to make it to any exit point in the country. And here Pakistan has now stepped up patrolling. It says it simply cannot take any more Afghan refugees because every time there's been a conflict in Afghanistan, most Afghans have made it to Pakistan through this land route. And UN estimates suggest there are about 1.4 million Afghans already in Pakistan. The Pakistani government says if you account for unregistered migrants, that number could be as high as 3 million. So right now, Pakistan is only letting Afghan nationals across the border, those who have valid Pakistani-issued government IDs. India, on the other hand, has been trying to evacuate as many Afghan nationals as it can. It has prioritized persecuted minority groups, Afghan Sikhs and Hindus, and about 112 have been flown on evacuation flights. For other Afghans, India has also launched an emergency visa route, urging them to apply. But earlier this week, India also cancelled all the existing visas issued to Afghans who are not in the country, saying because of the security situation, it was forced to take this step, which is why it's urging all Afghan nationals to now apply for that emergency visa if they want to make it to the country.
What concerns, if any, would India have about the security implications of the crisis in Afghanistan? I know the government has said it's a wait-and-see situation whether or not it will acknowledge the Taliban in terms of their coming into power. What exactly is wait-and-see?
I think because of the security situation, we saw what happened in the last 24 hours with the ISIS Khorasan claiming responsibility for that blast outside the Kabul International Airport. And this is exactly the kind of situation that India has been warning the world about for the last 2 weeks. India, if you'll remember, currently has rotational presidency of the UNSC, and it's used that platform to repeatedly remind the world that because of the instability we're now seeing in Afghanistan, the uncertainty that persists there, it's going to give room for many terror organizations to increase their footprint in the Indian subcontinent. And this particular group, the ISIS Khorasan group, is a breakaway group of the Pakistan Taliban. It's among one of the most dreaded active terror organizations in Afghanistan. And the worry in India is that, this is going to be a situation which leads to the export of terror to its own country. There are concerns about what this means for the militancy movement in Kashmir. The Indian government has put many regions on standby, telling them to be alert to any kind of insurgency that might happen on the Indian subcontinent. Similarly, you have governments in Sri Lanka, Nepal, Bangladesh, all of them talking about the impact that the instability in Afghanistan could have on their home turf as well. So the concern is because of the proximity, this could encourage other terror organizations as well, and instability in India's own backyard means there will be ramifications for the country here as well.
And I understand that India is also busy with the operation of evacuating Indian citizens who are in Afghanistan, but also speaking about Afghans who have stood with us. Is there any clarity on what that means?
India was among the last few countries to actually evacuate its diplomatic mission in Kabul. It only did that last week, and following that, it was only last weekend that these evacuation flights finally started. India, like many other countries, has struggled to get its nationals to the Kabul International Airport. You have about 6 flights that have operated so far, many of them, unfortunately, having to come back almost at half capacity because many Indians and Afghan nationals who would have been on those flights have been unable to make it to the airport in time. So the Indian government says it's doing everything it can. Its priority is, it says, to evacuate all Indian nationals at the earliest, and it'll continue to work towards that goal. But there have been questions about what India is doing to help Afghan friends. It's important to remember the historical ties that Kabul and New Delhi share. India has invested heavily in Kabul's development for decades now, and many Afghans have turned to India in times of distress. They come here to work, to study. There are close military ties as well. And what's happened in the last 2 weeks has been criticized by many who say that India should have been more forthcoming, should have extended more of a helping hand to Afghan nationals and not just prioritized Afghan Sikhs and Hindus who are persecuted minorities, but right now, everyone in Afghanistan who wants to leave the country, India should be able to help those people. So many Afghans who are in India already are now asking the government to extend their stay indefinitely, to grant them refugee status. India is not a signatory to the UN Refugee Convention, which means many Afghans who live here are living with a lot of uncertainty. What happens to them next is something they're not sure of. And they're similarly saying that New Delhi should also grant asylum to Afghan women and children who are, according to Afghans here, going to be the most persecuted minority in their home country.
All right, thank you very much. SABC News correspondent Neha Poona.